Hi, welcome to the Nurture Network. Today on the Nurture Network, I am so excited because I get to have a conversation with my friend. My friend Ella and fellow mom supporter is the founder of Ella Grace Sleep Solutions and a pediatric sleep specialist who works with newborns, babies, and toddlers, both virtually and in person here in New York City to help families build sustainable, restorative sleep routines that actually work for everyone. One of the things I love most about Ella, besides how fun she is and easy to talk to, is that she approaches sleep with so much compassion. She gets that sleep isn't just about the baby, it's also about the parents, the emotions, the boundaries, the identity shifts, all of it. Ella and I are always talking about how much overlap there is in the work that we do with moms, especially when it comes to those early moments of parenting when you're learning how to meet your child's needs and your own. And sleep is often the first time that tension shows up in a big way. So today we're digging into why sleep isn't just about getting your baby to stay asleep, although yes, we want that, but also it brings up so much around boundaries, guilt, identity, and really learning to lead as a parent. It's often the first times moms have to hold a firm no or say, hey, my needs matter too. And that's huge. So we're unpacking all of that today in the real honest way we always do. So welcome, Ella. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about how you got into sleep coaching to start or sleep training?
Okay, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I was studying to be a teacher, studying early childhood education, and I was working with families postpartum and their newborns and taking good care of moms and good care of new babies in the world. And one of the things that I was really good at was sleep, was helping the babies sleep and helping parents understand how to get their baby sleeping and what options they have. And one of the things that I picked up really early on coming into people's homes, especially those who had siblings, eldest, who were sleep trained or not sleep trained, was seeing that like families who had sleep trained, who had held boundaries around sleep, they were so much better off. And families that didn't have good sleepers and hadn't held boundaries and hadn't sleep trained were kind of a mess and we're struggling. And we're just struggling with sleep, but also struggling during the day to hold boundaries and just have this kind of parent child dynamic where the parent was the leader and the child was able to look to the leader to I don't know, understand the rules and what to do. And so sleep was just really an interest of mine. And then I became a pediatric sleep consultant, and now I get to help families every day get their babies and toddlers sleeping through the night and have everybody wake up happy and well rested, and for parents to be able to put their kids down at bedtime and have their evenings and know that they have that time, which is so important because we give so much to our children and so much to everyone all day. And so being able to have time to ourselves in the evening and to be able to sleep is just so important.
Yeah, and it is actually one of those things where like moms have to focus first and foremost on their bodies and their nervous systems being okay, and sleep is such a huge part of that. So let's just start with like let's define sleep training a little bit, because I think there's a lot of controversy around what does sleep training mean? Does it mean like you
Yeah.
put your baby in a room and just let them cry for 10 hours and eventually they learn? So like from your perspective as the expert, how do you define sleep training? When you say sleep training, what are you meaning?
Okay, such a good question because who you ask, they're going to have a different answer, and your pediatrician is going to have a different definition and understanding of what it means. So, to me, sleep training is a baby learning or a toddler learning how to sleep independently. So they have crib confidence or confidence in their toddler bed. They have a bedtime routine. You say goodnight and they confidently put themselves to sleep at bedtime. They can do the same thing throughout the night and they wake up in the morning happy. And the reason why I differentiate independent sleep skills from sleeping through the night is because you can have a 5 month old who falls asleep independently but still takes a night feed or a bottle overnight, and that doesn't make them, doesn't mean they're not sleep trained. So sleep trained is really about independent sleep.
Great. And that has different meanings at different ages as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is it like? You talked a little bit about like a parent sort of being the leader and like the kid really looking to the parent to say, okay, this parent knows what they're doing. I can follow them. I can trust them. So, what does it look like when a parent is really leading with love and boundaries in a sleep space?
Leading with love and boundaries. That's a great question. I feel like you might have a good answer to that. Well, I think like, when I think of boundaries, I think of them as kind of loving limits. And I think leading with love and boundary would be knowing that your toddler needs to go to sleep, that they need to unwind and go to bed, and also being able to have a bedtime routine and have be sleep around the same time every night, regardless of their pushback, right? So a lot of times parents will say, like it just doesn't work. Like we try to do bedtime, we try to do this, it just doesn't work. Like there's nothing that we can do unless we give in. And it's like, that's really not how it works. Like you have to keep doing it and you keep holding the line, even if there's pushback. And then eventually, like the children feel really, really safe and they're able to settle in and fall asleep peacefully. So sleep, like love and boundaries. I mean, to me, boundaries are the same thing as love. And so I guess I see them really as the same.
Yeah, I love that. That's absolutely true. And I see that with moms also of like, is love kind of, doing the fast version to get your result that you want. But really, what happens is parents wind up kind of shooting themselves in the foot in those scenarios, right? And so oftentimes love is about kind of like holding the boundary, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's hard, with like the long game in mind.
Yeah.
Because to your point, these things don't just kind of get fixed or quote work after one time or even two times of trying them.
No, and having your kid be happy all the time or making them happy is just not the same thing as love. And I have this great quote. I keep this on my desktop because I say this is like particularly relevant for toddler families. Let's see if I have it. Yeah, it's right here. So this is Janet Lansbury. It's remember loving our child does not mean keeping him happy all the time and avoiding power struggles. Often it's what feels hardest for us to do, saying no and meaning it. I love that.
I love that. We love Janet Lansbury. And that is such a good quote because, oftentimes making these careful decisions about what you want to do for your child comes from a place of love. And I know parents are doing that all the time, but then in the moment, they're having a really hard time carrying that through because they're confronted with their child's emotions. And so maintaining that boundary and what they know to be true, that decisions they made from a place of love becomes much harder in the reality of things. So what do you say to moms who are sort of feeling guilty about wanting to sleep or wanting their child to go to sleep? And I'm sure you deal with this with your clients all the time
Yeah.
where they're really like a lot of guilt is coming up around holding these boundaries and holding out the plan and then saying like it's okay, you need sleep, I need sleep. So what do you say to moms who are expressing that?
Yeah, I mean, mom guilt is such a thing, period. I feel that for sure. The guilt around sleep comes in so many different angles and it comes in different ways for different ages, right? I have toddler parents who, might have their kids in school during the day or they have a nanny and they have a hard time holding boundaries because they have a short amount of time with their child at the end of the day. I mean, I'm thinking of families with toddlers, but it can be relevant for kids of all ages. And then I have parents who, maybe they're rocking their kids to sleep or feeding their kids with a bottle, and that's what makes them happy. And they really don't want to make a change because they hate the idea of their kid being unhappy and crying. And, what I say to parents about the crying, which I mean, really, like the crying is what holds any parent back from doing what they know they need to do to get better sleep, right? It's there's always anxiety about the crying. And the reality is when you make a change to the way your baby or toddler sleeps, there's going to be an emotional reaction, right? They're going to have some things to say. You can't just go from, having your baby or toddler in bed with you to putting them in the crib and they're totally quiet and they close their eyes and go to sleep. It's like, we want that because it's easy for us, but that's not really the transition. That's not really the process of going from dependent sleep associations to independent sleep associations. So we have to like make space. I can't even remember the question now, but we have to make space for crying as a temporary part of this transition to something so much better. The question was about guilt. So yeah, I feel like the guilt is around I don't want to make my baby sad or cry or make a change. And the reality is like as a parent, you have to think, what does the whole family need? right? What is the sleep routine where we are all getting sleep? Because in no world does it make sense to have a sleep routine where maybe your baby sleeps really great in your bed, but you are so physically uncomfortable throughout the night and somebody's getting kicked in the face and every morning you wake up tired and grumpy. Like that is not a routine that works for the whole family. The whole family matters, and kids are extremely adaptable, so they can adjust to something different. But everybody needs to be getting sleep, and your baby's sleep preferences, they want to be in your bed. They want to nurse 5 times a night. They want to be rocked to sleep, at 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Those are preferences, but those are not sleep needs. And you really have to consider everybody's sleep needs, and there should be no guilt around that.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so many things you said, and I want to come back to a few of them, but let's go back to the crying thing, because I think this is a crux of something that comes up a lot for parents in general, of like maybe even what feeds the guilt, right? We were originally talking about guilt. And what do you think from your perspective with your clients is the thing that's really that parents are so resistant to hearing their children cry? I mean, there's obvious answer to that question, which when our children are crying when they're babies, it is a natural way of communicating, right? So the thing that we do to help them or to respond to the crying is to help them to not cry, right?
Yeah.
But as they get older and then they have language, crying becomes like a bodily response, right? Maybe they're sad, maybe they're angry and they're crying. And we physically, as parents, have like a huge resistance to that. So, in your experience with your clients, how do you kind of get them through that a little bit? And yes, you listen to the crying, but also you don't make all your decisions based on the crying.
No, and I feel like you have to listen to it and then decide how you want to respond. And I think there's kind of two separate answers for babies versus toddlers. I think, if it definitely feels more like a boundary with toddlers, and for the younger babies, it can feel harder when they're crying because they're basically saying like, I don't like this. This is hard. I'm tired. I don't know how to do this. And that's really what they're saying through the crying. And, parents are like, well, I want to go in and help. Like, oh, and of course you do. Every good parent that I talk to, every client that I have struggles with sleep training because they're amazing parents. And it's really hard to sit back when your baby's learning how to put themselves to sleep and you can't go rock them and you can't go do the one thing that's going to help them. And so I guess for families with babies, we really talk about just being able to hold space for them not liking it and learning something new and being on that learning curve and supporting them in a way that makes sense for the family, right? Some families are going to be sitting in the room in the beginning, and then it's going to take them a couple days before they graduate out of the room. And some families are able to step out of the room right away and give those kind of reassuring checks from the start. So I talk to parents about how, there are certain things that we can't change, but we can change how you support. And let's find what makes sense for you guys and what makes sense for your baby. But of course, when you're giving more space and less support, that's the journey you have to go through, right? Like that's how you get to independent sleep. And so we have to be real about that. And then for toddlers, it's usually a lot more about holding boundaries and saying no and getting through the bedtime routine and moving through bath time. And it's the last book, and the last book means the last book, and like saying what you mean and meaning what you say and being able to trust that they can build up. And a lot of times for toddlers, it's like reestablishing crib confidence. A lot of toddler families already did sleep train, but then now they have a toddler and it's like a whole new world. And so they're like, well, how do I approach this now? Um, yeah.
Yeah. And do you work with your clients on sort of that middle piece of there's holding the boundaries when, let's say, your toddler is crying about bedtime, you're carrying through the plan that you've carefully planned with Ella, and you're going through it and you're maintaining the boundaries, you're doing it with love. Your baby's crying, or your toddler's crying, it's hard, but how much are we talking with parents about like acknowledging how the children are feeling through that? And again, not probably so much when they're babies, although there is an argument around a little bit of it, but more in the toddler parenting world. Are you able to have those conversations with parents that you work with?
That's a great question. Kind of coaching them through telling their toddlers, like, I know you really don't like this. I know you want, I mean, a lot of times before making changes to toddler sleep, I have families sit down and do a family meeting and talk about exactly what's going to happen, so that the toddlers know exactly what we're not doing anymore, exactly what mom and dad are going to do, exactly what they can do, and like bringing them into the changes and kind of like, I don't know, bringing them into giving them some control before the changes happen. And then the really important part of that is, though, once the parents say what's going to happen, it happens. And then when the kids hear that and then it's happening, it gives them a lot of comfort and safety that, like, okay, this is hard, but like my parents are in charge and they're doing exactly what they say.
Right, right. And then there are these little opportunities in these moments. I think sometimes parents think, okay, I'm holding the boundary, I'm being really strong. And Ella, we made these decisions with Ella and we're gonna stick to them. And then they almost like forget about that piece of saying, like, I know this is so hard. You're sad, you don't want mom to leave, but you know that you got this and I got this. And
Yeah.
those little acknowledgments can kind of go a long way with kind of diffusing some of the big feelings that are happening for little kids around sleep time.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a sample dialogue that I give to parents, and one of them has to do with like, I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be there supporting you the whole time, or like I'm with you all the way, and talking
Mm.
about how they might like not like it, but like, you know, I'm here supporting you, and I know you can do this, and you might not like it, and I'm also gonna be here for you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because it is this idea of trust, right? For we both got this. Changes are hard, but we both got this.
Yeah, and the parents have to be really, really calm and really confident in the steps. And I also say, like, you have to believe as a parent that you're doing the best thing for your child and the best thing for your family. If there's any hesitance about what you're moving forward with, you're going to be a little iffy. Your child's going to pick up on that. Like, they have to feel like I'm in really good hands. And you have to know you're doing something really, really, that's something that's the best for your family.
Yeah, and that's really hard to do, and especially when you're kind of like in the weeds of it all as a parent. And so I think that's like this perfect example of why it's so important to bring in an outside person who's sort of objective, who sees a lot of families and can kind of like help come up with that plan because it's so easy as a parent to question yourself in those moments.
Yeah, for sure.
So, can you give us a little like success story about, like, think of maybe one of your clients or one experience where a parent who just found their footing, becoming sort of a leader for their children in sleep coaching and the sleep department?
That's such a great question. I'm thinking about two families. I'm thinking about one who I'm working with right now, whose daughter is about 19, 20 months, and they were rocking her to sleep at bedtime. And again, she's getting into like that older toddler, close to 2 age. And bedtime was just a ton of pushback. It used to be easy to rock her, and then all of a sudden it was taking like 1 to 2 hours. She wants another book. She wants to go on the rocking horse. And really what was needed was boundaries. Yes, she needed to go from being rocked to sleep to falling asleep in her crib, but it was really the first time that the parents had to be like, okay, like, no, last book. And like, you can't jump up and like go on your rocking horse and play more, and we're not going to turn on the lights. And not only did she do really well, but the parents have done really well at holding the boundaries and working through it. And it's been amazing to see how quickly she has responded to her parents holding the line and how easily she's falling asleep and sleeping through. And then the other family that I was thinking about was a family who's actually nearby, who I got to meet the mom, which was so special, and they were just really struggling with bedtime. She was up a lot overnight. She was waking up early in the morning. We changed the schedule. We changed how she fell asleep, and everybody was sleeping so much better. But the whole dynamic for the family changed. Like, the mom was like, we're just living a different life now. She was like, my daughter has so much energy. She's eating better during the day. We see a new side of her personality. And they went through this like whole transformation of everybody getting sleep and then everybody thriving. That was so beautiful to watch, and to hear her describe her daughter in such a different way was like, oh my God, so special.
That's amazing. What do you think was for the first family that you shared about, what was the big thing that helped them shift, like from kind of responding to their child's wants and needs for 2 hours at bedtime to
Yeah.
getting to the place of being able to say, okay, this is the boundary and being able to hold it?
I think they really just needed a plan, and they needed the backup support of me monitoring what was happening.
Mhm.
Because, a lot of this stuff is simple. It's pretty straightforward. Like, I don't hold, I've been working with families for so many years that I like really understand the nuances, and I can pick up on things, and I can, see who kids are and see who parents are and meet everybody's needs. But there's not all these secrets that I have. Yes, there's knowledge, but like there's no secrets to sleep training. And that's like really important. And so I feel like what they really needed was just like, we can do this, and here's how you do this, and she's going to respond well to this, and like, let's do it. And they were like, we respond really well to a plan, we can do this. Um, yeah.
I'm so curious about this because what do you think is holding somebody back? I mean, I mentioned it before about like bringing in an expert, somebody who's objective, but what is it about having that other person? Like, for example, this family is saying, we're good with plans, but like, it's so hard. And I'm really empathizing with parents. Like, I've been there myself. You're in it and you're like, I can't pinpoint what I should do in this situation to improve it. So they get to like a very extreme bad place. And then they say, okay, I need to bring somebody in. But what is the thing that's like keeping us as parents from being able to say, you know what? I know what I need to do and I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah, maybe it's not being, I think for sleep, it's not being able to see the other side of it. Like you can read a book, you can read blog articles, but it's like, I really tell people, like, you're going to borrow my confidence until you find yours. And I think it's the confidence, because it's like, people just, they're like, my kid can't be sleep trained. My kid's really strong willed. I don't think this is going to work. Like, I think they have a general sense of what they need to do, but how to put it together 100%, they're not sure. And also just how to get to the other side. And also, I think a lot of families will try something. Well, it'll be in the works of getting better, but they're struggling, and then they stop and they're not able to get to the other side. And I think there's also just the guilt. Like, I even thought about this. I took my son goes to swim, and he did a makeup class on a different day with, I think, a different teacher. And he was just didn't want to go. He was crying. I felt really bad. I'm like, do I put him in the water? Like, what do I do? Do I just take him home? Like, I was really like spinning my wheels. And then I ended up like, kind of saying you need to go, and then he ended up having a great time and it was fine. But in that moment I was really like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. Is this wrong? Like, parenting decisions are hard, and it's just you, and you want to do right by your kid. And I feel like we're in an age right now where we feel like there's only one right way, and like if you mess up, it's so final. And like, we're all trying to, raise like emotionally intelligent kids. And like, if you yell, it's not good. And if you don't do this, it's not good. And it's just like, oh, it's like, I think we're really tough on ourselves. In parenting and life as women. And so, dads too, but particularly like moms, I think feel a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that exact thing while you were talking. And I love that example with your son because I feel like, in my experience with the women that I work with, and even with myself, we as a generation of parents are trying so hard to empathize with our children and show them so much respect as individuals, right? And hear them. And I think that's really hard to balance that, which is all good. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's hard to then know, when do I need to push through like what this kid is telling me they want versus what I know as the adult and the parent and the leader that they need.
Yeah.
And I think we do start to question ourselves when our children are telling us something different from what we maybe even know to be true ourselves. But we sometimes need that other person to come in and say, no, no, if you carry through with this plan that you already know is like the right way to do this, it will work. Like you just said, they have a lot of questions about whether it's actually going to work. And so that winds up stopping them from doing it. And it also makes me think so much about how we used to raise kids with more people around, more generations around, more expertise from family around. And now we are so much parenting on our own. So someone like you, someone like me coming in and maybe having some developmental knowledge and, like you said, like some expertise, but also saying, no, like, you don't have this wrong, you have this right, and we're going to do this together, and you're going to carry it through even though it's hard.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly that.
Yeah. Okay, so what about just some, like, let's shift to like just some practical tips, right, around sleep for parents. What's one shift a parent could maybe make today to feel more empowered around sleep?
Great question. I would say knowing your child's sleep needs is a really important part of getting them on an age appropriate schedule and being able to have a schedule that, supports consolidated nighttime sleep, a schedule that works for their body and makes it easy for them to turn off the lights and find sleep, right? So for younger babies, like you're navigating a lot of naps and you're trying to, is it two naps? Is it three naps? Are they ready for one nap? How much can they sleep during the day and at night, right? Because you're looking at that totality. How much are they sleeping in a 24-hour cycle? And does this work for my kid, right? So that's a really big thing. And then when it comes to nap time and bedtime, when things are aligned well, they're ready for sleep and they can sleep well. And that's particularly true for toddlers as well. Like, people come 2.5, 3, 4, maybe the toddler's still napping or they're not napping or they're napping too much. And so making sure that they're getting sleep at the right times and not making it easy for bedtime to work. A lot of times kids are still sleeping at daycare, they're sleeping too much, and then bedtime is really difficult at the end of the day. And sometimes it's like boundaries need to be held, and sometimes it's also there's a nap in the day that's making nighttime sleep really difficult. So understanding how much sleep is normal at this age, how much sleep does my child need, right? Do they need maybe less sleep or more sleep than I think? What works for them is a big one. Having a bedtime routine that actually supports your family and your child's temperament, right? Sometimes kids do really well with like a sleepy, calm, and peaceful music and, bubble bath and lavender bedtime routine, and that works really well. And sometimes kids have more energy to burn than we think, and they need some rough and tumble play, and they need to run around after dinner for 30 minutes and be a little bit wild, and then you can transition into the bedtime routine. So finding an evening routine that works well, and again, everybody coming from work, everybody coming from school or a nanny, making sure you have quality time, one-to-one time, and having time where your kid, that's unstructured and you can say yes to stuff, right? So maybe it's before dinner or after dinner, you play and it's just on, it's just, it's their desires, right? You're going to follow their lead, you're going to listen to them, you're going to kind of just they're going to get to call the shots. And then when the bedtime routine runs around, it doesn't feel like you're dragging them through and they've just like had to do everything, that you've wanted all day. It's like they got some time to have like choice time or free time, which is important.
That's great. And what would you say kind of in relation to that? Because as you're talking, I'm thinking about like almost like a kid's entire day and how it connects to sleep, right? So if I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but if you have to think of like one thing that people don't associate with sleep that is connected to sleep, what would you have anything that's like a surprising thing that
Oh,
people
surprise.
don't think is connected to sleep, but really does affect it?
That's a good question. The things that pop up are kind of obvious. I think about TV. I think about food, what the child's eating in terms of just sugar and also just nutritional value and kind of nourishing food versus empty food, and also being able to hold boundaries at dinner time. I find that when families are struggling to manage dinner time, and then when it gets to bedtime, their kid's hungry and then they're doing another dinner and bedtime gets pushed back later. So that's a big one. TV, definitely. I've had families who have switched from TV to what's it called? The Yodo player, or there's one other that's similar, where they can listen to stories versus watching TV. I'm trying to think of other things. There's other ones to stand. I can't think of any secret things.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also think that really illustrates like how our ability to kind of like be strong leaders and have loving boundaries and carry those throughout the day is going to affect sleep, but also it's just like the same story all day long and everything affects everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's often how we talk anyway.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite? I love how you said earlier, you said you sometimes tell parents you're going to borrow my confidence until you have your own. What's another favorite like reminder or like mantra that you share with tired parents to keep in mind as they're going through these hard things?
We definitely talk a lot about, in that again, like very temporary transition where your baby or toddler is learning something new, that their crying is saying, I don't like this. This is hard. I'm
Mm.
really tired and I wish this was different. And they're not saying, I'm hungry. They're not saying, I'm scared, I'm unsafe. They're in their home. They're with their loving parents. They have warm pajamas. They're in a very safe crib. I know they have expensive cotton sheets. Like these are loved children, right? These are amazing parents and loved children. When you step back and you're like, my baby's fed, my baby's warm, my baby is like so loved and clean diaper, like all their needs are met, you're like, okay, like let me work through this process and get to a place where we have a sleep routine that works for everybody in the family.
I love that because it's so much about perspective. And oftentimes, when we find ourselves in these difficult moments, we kind of do lose perspective. We all do. It's like the nature of being human, where also you're exhausted and you're feeling like this is so hard and my kid is crying. And it's really helpful to have that like perspective shift. So I want to go back to you gave that example of that mom who told you, like, our whole family is different now that we're kind of on the other side and we've made these changes that we wanted to make. How I'd love to just talk. I mean, I know you work with parents, not just moms, but the Nurture Network really focuses a lot on moms and what moms need. And how do you encourage moms to support themselves through like that hard part, right? Like the hard process of getting from where you don't want to be to where you do want to be with a great plan with you, but like let's say it takes a week. That's painful and exhausting and emotionally, physically depleting. Like, how do you talk to moms, or how do you even draw their attention to the quality of care they're giving themselves through these things? Because the attention can often be a lot on the children in these kinds
For
of situations.
For sure. When there are two parents who are doing the sleep training, a lot of times we'll talk about, who feels more confident doing the work, whether that's sitting in the room or checking in and out of the room. So does dad feel a little bit better about that? Does mom feel better? Does anybody want to, is more comfortable sitting back and somebody's more comfortable leading? And then if, somebody's not as comfortable leading, how do we reintroduce them when the process is a little bit easier for the child? So like, let's say we get to day 3, 4, 5, and child's doing a lot better. How can we reintroduce the other parent and get them confident in doing this? A lot of times one thing that I hear is like the mom gets so much more pushback when it comes to sleep, and kids have different relationships with their parents, so that's normal. But a lot of times one of the things that happening is that mom's giving in, and then the child is so much harder on the mom because there's that intermittent reinforcement, and then the crying just ramps up. So yeah, talking about how we're going to share the workload of nights and middle of the night. And then when I have moms who have younger babies and they're at home with the babies, talking about what pace and what cadence we want to do this at. So do we want to do naps and nights at the same time, or does that feel like way too much for the mom who's at home with the baby during the day to be doing this at night and doing this during the day? And then also for the mom, like one of the things that I really prioritize, it's usually the moms that are home, but for whoever's at home with the baby, if the mom's not working, blah blah blah, is like what feels good to you during the day? Like, do we want to do some of these naps outside of the house? Do you like all the naps to be in the crib? How can you have an enjoyable day? I don't want your day to be about how to get my baby to sleep 2 hours 3 times a day. Like, that's not really the goal. The goal is for you guys to have an enjoyable day, for your baby to be getting good quality rest, for you to be getting that break, for your baby to be, prepped for a really great night's sleep, but for you guys to not be thinking and stressing and worrying and timing sleep all day. So that's a big one too.
Yeah, that's really great. Almost like breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, and also chunks that are comfortable and not like adding stress to the parent as they're trying to achieve these goals.
Yeah, and I think anytime, like I always think about some of the hardest times are when Peter's sick and you're just so running on empty and you need 110% for your kid. And like in those moments, it's like, I'm going to order some food. Like the laundry's not getting done. Like the dishes are going to pile up. Like that stuff has to go. So whether you're sleep training or you're just like, working on something, giving a lot, like you have to let some of those things go.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that because I think moms especially need to hear when it's okay to let things go because we're often just trying to do too much in general.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for at least for me, it's like when I get stressed to feel like, okay, I need to, like everything needs to be perfect, and then I'll be more calm. And it's like no, it's
You're
not
doing
really.
the opposite to yourself.
Exactly, it's taken me, like, my son's gonna be 4 this year, it's taken me that long to figure that one out and watch and be like, "Okay, you're overstimulated, now you're trying to control everything. Nope, we're just gonna have a smoothie and PB&J for dinner, and that's gonna be enough, and that's like, or we're gonna go out to dinner, or, like, let's get in bed and watch a TV show." And, like, just how much happier everybody is doing that versus being stressed trying to put a, whole oven roasted chicken on the table. It's like, enough, like, no, it's not tonight.
No, that's
It'll
such
be
a good
tomorrow, but it's not
yeah.
tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. It's just like knowing yourself well enough to know when you're just like, okay, what do I need to let go? What do I need to take off my plate? As opposed to, what we have been talking about, which is like, okay, I'm going to go on this plan and I'm going to do these extra things and I'm going to like work harder. And then there are these moments where it's like, no, actually the choice is to work less. So you just gave that example of saying like, oh, I can tell I'm overstimulated and this is what I need. On
Yeah.
this podcast, I feel like almost every conversation winds up coming back to how moms are often so like disconnected from ourselves and our bodies. And I guess like I'm thinking about that in terms of sleep and the children too. Like, what are these what do you talk to moms and parents about in terms of being aware of what their own body is telling them? And also, like, the second question is that awareness of like teaching their children how to be in tune with their own bodies and like
Hmm.
for example, you even said earlier about like the kid that needs to run around. Like there is an age at some point, even 3, where like their body is telling them first, right? So like as parents we have to see those signals. Like they're not being defiant, they just need to get the wigglies out or whatever at bedtime. So I guess just talk a little bit about that body piece for ourselves and for the children.
Okay, I think I'll throw it back to you for parents because I think you'll have a really good answer there. For kids, one thing that I think about is when you don't have an established sleep routine and sleep's a bit messy, it's really hard to tell how much sleep your child needs because they're often fighting it because they don't want to go to sleep, they want to stay up, they want to be with you. It's easy for them to fight sleep and to not, to struggle with finding sleep and falling asleep. And then when you introduce independent sleep and they're very confident in their crib and you have this great routine, it's like, wow, okay, but they actually sleep 30 minutes later every morning and they're getting an hour more sleep every day between that nap and night. And they're actually really happy falling asleep. And I thought my kid hated sleep and they actually really don't. So that's one thing that I think about is like seeing the child's actual sleep needs and them having a peaceful relationship with sleep after holding some boundaries.
Right. I love that. And some of that is like being curious as a parent, right? Like paying attention to the patterns and what your child is kind of showing you. Because as I said before, I think we often get in these moments where we're like, our kid is just being defiant by what they're doing, or, but if you start to look at the patterns and almost look at it through a somatic or a physical lens, then you're saying, okay, I'm going to get curious about what are the patterns that are coming up and like, what am I seeing my kid do every time at bedtime? And you were even saying that some kids are different from others and some kids show exhaustion in different ways. My son was definitely one of those kids who would like get wired at bedtime. And then I was realizing that he was probably going to bed a little bit too late. Like he was probably crossing over that line, even at an older age.
Yeah.
And these are some things to like, really get curious and almost like observe. Do you have a portion of time when you work with parents where you're observing what's happening before you start making changes, or where you have them observing and kind of like almost taking mental notes?
Yeah, I have everybody filling out a sleep log when we work together so I can monitor the progress and see how the child's doing and see what the parents are doing. But even today, I had a family whose child is waking up at 6 and they were talking about, can we get it a little bit later, thinking about changing the schedule. And that's a conversation where I want to get on the phone with them versus being on the log because I want to ask them, okay, how she's waking up in the morning, how's that stretch between morning rise and nap, how is she doing in the stretch from nap to bedtime, how is the energy at bedtime, and then I can like piece together how she's doing and whether we can make a change and shift something around to have her sleep later in the morning. But there's like a lot of questions to ask to be able to piece together what's actually going on for her.
Right. Right. And I love that because a lot of the children that you're working with can't communicate. verbally, right? So a lot of the observations that parents have to do when their kids are young, I mean, yes, there's ways that kids communicate non-verbally, but then there's also a lot of subtle things that we can observe about their bodies and what they're showing us, to like make decisions from that place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to go back to the parent piece, I think it's interesting because I wonder if the sleep topic, when you're observing your child and learning kind of about what they do when they're tired or what they do when they're scared or sad or whatever's happening, it can kind of model for us actually as parents, like how to pay attention to our own bodies, because
Mm.
we have stuff that starts to come up for us, but we kind of ignore what's happening with our bodies, where kids are really like leading with their bodies and expressing through their bodies, especially before they have language. And there is so much that we can learn from that as parents.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so our biggest area of overlap in terms of age of children are these toddlers, right? So often I have clients come to me right around when their children are becoming toddlers, because this is the time when children A, get language, B, start really kind of individuating and realizing like, I'm not exactly the same person as you, and I'm going to be my separate person and have my own opinion and agenda. So let's talk a little bit about that age and kind of how the individuating and, even the language development affects sleep for toddlers.
Sure. Yeah, I really get a lot of, yes, I get some toddler families who have never sleep trained and they want to establish independent sleep, but a lot of the toddler families I get have already sleep trained. They sleep trained when their babies were younger, and then their toddlers either went in a toddler bed or they just started giving them a hard time and they didn't really know how to handle it. And now all of a sudden, mom or dad is lying with them for an hour before they go to sleep. And so, I wrote down some of the reasons why, your toddler suddenly won't sleep. And, what feels like regressive behavior usually isn't random, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just about like they're seeking connection and they don't want to separate. Bedtime's a separation, right? And so sometimes it's simply just protesting that. Sometimes it's not even that deep. It's just a preference. They decide they want you in the room. They don't want to go to bed and they're not subtle about it. But a lot of times there are connections between why there's pushback. A lot of times toddler families, the toddlers will get sick or they'll travel and the sleep routine will kind of fall off. And then instead of the parents getting back on track, the children are asking for the same support. Maybe they were in the parents' bed or maybe the parents were holding them to sleep and they don't want to stop doing that. And then the parents end up stuck doing that and they're not sure how to get back to the routine. So that's like sickness and travel. And then there are a lot of big life transitions that happen for toddlers, right? There's a new sibling in the family. There's starting school, starting daycare, full-time nanny that was there since they were a baby, maybe transitioning out, or a new part-time nanny coming in for after school, moving houses. Like all these feelings bubble up at bedtime. And they can make the separation piece of bedtime harder. And then there's that pushback. And then from the parents, it's like, I don't know what to do. And then the sleep routine can fall off track.
Yeah, and it's actually making me think so much about how, you can have a plan for a specific age child and your specific family situation, and then literally a year later, everything can be different and you can need to like revisit and find a new plan. And so do you often have parents kind of coming back to you like 2 years later and saying, okay, everything's gone off the rails again, please help us get back on the tracks?
For sure. I mean, a lot of times it's the toddler bed because how do I handle my toddler running out of the room, right? And it's actually really not that complicated. It's about telling them what the new sleep routine looks like with the toddler bed, what you're going to do, what they're allowed to do, and then bringing them back with like no drama and no power struggle and saying, okay, I'm going to help you. You can walk back to your room or I can help you get back into your bed. Sometimes it's standing right by the door so that you're cutting all the chaos and kind of like the back and forth and excitement that they're looking for. You're turning off the lights in the living room. The house is asleep. You're right at the door. You're bringing them right back. Right? It's like you're keeping it really boring. What was the question? I forgot. What was
Oh,
I?
just how parents are coming back to you with.
Oh, yeah. So there's the toddler bed, and then just also. yeah, how do I handle pushback? And a lot of the times it's holding the same boundaries that we held when they were little. And sometimes for families where there's a separation anxiety piece, right, where the crying at bedtime feels really intense, where the pushback feels really heightened and it doesn't feel like an I want to play, I don't want to go to bed. It feels like this kind of this anxiety from the kid, then it's usually about rebuilding their confidence slowly, right? So maybe they had an independent sleep routine, but instead of, going right to those checks, we're going to have the parents sit in the room for a little bit and rebuild their confidence in that sleep space. And then we're going to graduate to the parent being out of the room and give the child a chance to settle down a little bit before we remove the parental presence.
Yeah, it's such a great, like everything you're saying is just such a great example of having to balance like what you know about your child, what you know about your family, what you know about yourself, and then also like what you know to be best for your child and really kind of customizing your plan. And that's what you help parents do so well. And a big part of why I started the Nurture Network in the first place was to kind of cut through a lot of the noise that's out there because as parents, we have the entire internet at our fingertips. So sure, we can look up like how much sleep should a 2-year-old be getting. But when we're trying to get from that point, or we're trying to take that information and then make it fit with our child and our family, and like you said, take baby steps to get to the place we want to get to, that whole part becomes so much harder to do on our own. So everything you've said has been so great in terms of giving some guidance around how to like cut through that noise and pay attention to your child, pay attention to yourself and what you need, come up with really clear, strong plans, and then hold loving boundaries, but also, know when to be soft with yourself and your child.
Yeah. 100%.
So say it again.
100%.
So thank you so much for
Oh,
being here with me today. And I love chatting with you every time we get a chance to.
I know.
Um, where can people find you and how can they find you? Because I know any family who works with Ella is always so grateful that they did.
Website, ellagracesleepsolutions.com, Instagram, Ella Grace Sleep Solutions. My door's always open. Send me an email, send me a message on Instagram. Yeah, happy to help and happy to support.
Yeah, and I'll have all that information in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining me today, Ella, and I'll see you soon.